This is Brascheck, and this is the last day of August 2020. It's Monday night, late Monday night, August 31st, and I'm going to give you two pieces of information that should shut the COVID con down right away. We were told this was a fast-spreading disease. We were told that it was highly fatal. We were told there was no treatment, there was no cure for it. And we were told that there was a thing called the asymptomatic spreader, the person with no symptoms, the child, for example, who could give this to people and kill them. Well, Tony Fauci came out and admitted what has been known in medical science for at least 200 years, that asymptomatic people, people without symptoms, do not drive epidemics. Let me repeat that. People without symptoms do not drive epidemics. They never have. And they're not doing it in this case. At least nobody has proven it. That comes straight from the lips of Tony Fauci. Here's the video.
Yeah. To just add one thing that seems to get lost in that question is that, as Bob said, and I agree, we would really like to see the data, because if there is asymptomatic transmission, it impacts certain policies that you do regarding screening, etc. But the one thing historically people need to realize, that even if there is some asymptomatic transmission, in all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers.
Okay, the next piece of information, and this is huge, and this is on the CDC's own website. Many intelligent people, many people who actually know medicine, have been saying since March, maybe even since February, that to die with a disease is not the same as dying of a disease. Okay? If somebody's got advanced diabetes, dementia, and stage 4 cancer, and they get a cold, it would be a license-losing crime, medical license-losing crime, for a doctor to put "he died of a cold" on the person's death certificate. Okay? When there are multiple reasons, and some of those reasons have been around for months or years in the person's health, you don't put a random disease down as the cause of death. Until, of course, COVID-19 came along, when doctors were told if there is even the faintest connection to COVID-19 in this person's death, make sure it ends up on the death certificate. And then when CDC and Johns Hopkins and CNN and all the news outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, report the COVID death count, they're telling you that every single person who's died since January, who had any connection to COVID at all, died of COVID. That's fraud. That's always been fraud. We've been telling you it's fraud. And now, in the fine print, the CDC admits it's fraud. Here's the statement from their own website, from their own recent report. For 6% of deaths, COVID was the only cause mentioned. That means in 94% of the so-called COVID deaths, there were other diseases involved, often very, very serious diseases. So that means for every 100 COVID deaths the media claims, only 6 of them are people who died of COVID and nothing else. All right, so let's do a little bit of math. Let's say they're claiming that 160, these numbers change all the time, but let's say they're claiming that 160,000 people have died of COVID. What you have to do is multiply that by 0.06, which gets you 6%. The true number is not 160,000, it's 9,600. Not 160,000, 9,600. 6%. All right, if you don't have a calculator handy and you want to be able to do the math in your head, you can do a rough estimate. And here's how you do it. Take 160,000, cut it in half. All right, so if they say 160,000, it's 8,000. It's 80,000. Then move the decimal point over 1. So it starts out as 160,000. You have it. That's 80,000. You move the decimal point over, and that gives you 8,000. Okay? That's a rough way to do it. Obviously, we're off. It's not as precise. In fact, it gives them the benefit of the doubt. If you use the calculator, you're going to come up with 9,600. If you do this, in your head math, you'll be off a little bit, but you won't be off by much. So whatever the number is that they tell you in the news media, have it and then divide it by 10. Having it should be easy, and then to divide by 10, you just move the decimal point 1 over. So let's do a simple one. Let's say it's 200,000. Have it, that's 100,000. Then move the decimal point over 1. That gives you 100,000 down to 10,000. Know that you're off a little bit. You're off by 1%. I mean, you're off a little bit. You're a little bit low, but you're not very low. You're in the ballpark. It's good enough for a in the head calculation. So whatever the number is on TV, you can calculate it, and you can be assured that this thing has been exaggerated beyond all belief. Do people die of COVID? That's actually debatable, but let's assume it's true. Even the CDC will tell you of all the people they're claiming have COVID who died, only 6% died of COVID itself and not a whole bunch of other diseases. So with this information alone, we should be able to shut the whole thing down and get back to business, get back to work, get back to normal life. We've got to share this information. That's the only way it's going to happen. So I hope you'll share it. And I would love not to have to record any more of these. I mean, this is an incredible time sink to have to be repeating the same basic common sense information over and over again. But at least in this case, it's coming out of the conspirators' own mouths. Fauci has told you there was never, and there never will, well, there could be in the future, you don't know, but there has never been a thing called an asymptomatic super spreader. So all this nonsense about that is exactly that. If somebody's not obviously sick, they're not spreading disease, okay? Second, whatever the number is, they are exaggerating it massively. And they're doing it by throwing everybody that's ever come across the path of COVID who happens to die of any cause as a COVID death. That's just pure fraud. The real number is about whatever number they put up there. It's 6% of that. And you can do it in your head. You'll be a little off, but you're close enough. By whatever number they give you, have it, and then divide it by 10, and you'll be in the ballpark of what the actual number is. You do not shut the world economy down because 10,000 people in the United States have died of a disease. Okay? If you did that, we're going to be shut down forever without ceasing. Okay? This is beyond insane. It's time for it to stop. It's time for you to do whatever you can to get this word out to people, because this is just we shouldn't be in September and continuing to face this.